Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 12th of December, 2025, a little bit after 1 o'clock. A couple of technical gremlins there. I do apologise for those. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me by video link is Patrick Henningsen and Tim Norman. And later in the programme, Basil Valentine will be joining us for a report on the Filton Six trial and also British overflights of Gaza. We'll be covering the latest attack on VPNs in the UK and also Facebook censorship. And we'll have an update on last night's UK Column event in Salisbury. We're going to begin today with, well, apparently the flu, because we're all getting it. And as a result, the National Health Service is completely overrun by it. So here's BBC front page from yesterday from BBC News. Flu cases jump sharply in England as NHS faces worst case scenario. Today, that had been changed to flu surge, a challenge for NHS, unlike any since the pandemic. And that was according to Wes Streeting. Patrick, let me welcome you to the programme here. And I mean, where do we start with this? Assuming you're not completely in stitches at this point.
All I can say, Mike, is as long as there's not a variant on the loose, I think we should all be pretty safe.
No. This is a variant, Patrick. This is the point. Right. This is a variant.
Yeah, I really, I'm so done with the flu and COVID, Mike. I really have no comment. But if they want to try this one over the holiday season, I think it's a effort. But population, I think, is quite wise to all this.
Well, that is the question. Are they wise to it? And I suppose the question that I have is, why are they pushing this? Well, I'm sure there are many, many reasons, but let's give one possible explanation, because here is the final report of the COVID Counter Fraud Commissioner. This is entitled Pursuing Recoveries and Preventing Reoccurrence. And this is what it says. Weak accountability, bad quality data, and poor contracting were identified as the primary causes of the £10.9 billion losses. So this was money taken from the British government during the COVIDocracy. The report highlights that counter-fraud controls were inadequate and only improved later in the pandemic. And the Commissioner makes further recommendations to ensure the country is prepared for further crises that need an economic response from government. And, lots of people won big time during the COVID years, Patrick, not only the pharmaceutical companies, but also all the people that were pulling taxpayer money out. Never mind track and trace, which apparently we're going to not worry about the amount of money that was lost to that and using that, the continuation of that same policy to sort of roll out the digital ID scheme. But this pulling of money out of the state at this time was quite incredible. And apparently we're going to keep going with it.
Like all good inquiries, Mike. There you go. It was a cock up. We must do better next time. We must be more. Close these gaps in our bureaucracy. Meanwhile, the question should have been, why did we declare a pandemic in the first place over a normal flu season? And why did we pay businesses to close and people to stay at home? That really should be the real question, but that's not where you're going to get here. No cover-up, no conspiracy, just a cock-up.
Well, no cover-up, no conspiracy, just a cock-up. Could that equally apply to what we were talking about in Salisbury last night, Patrick, do you think?
Exactly the same. It was a great event. You were there, Mike. My colleague Tim Norman, he's on the line right now as well. It was a very good turnout. We were very surprised. There were more skeptical people in the community than we thought. So it was great to hear some alternative perspectives on this from people within the community. Craig Murray, of course, was fantastic, as was Tim Norman. And I think people came away much better informed than when they arrived. And that's the whole purpose of why we did this event and why we conceived it in the first place. But yeah, I think of all the press we've done so far on this subject, it's a very prickly subject for the local community, and rightfully so. It really, this event, this narrative traumatized the local community. It really hit the economy hard. So people are, still a bit sore, you could say, from this, and they really want to put it behind them. But the problem is the Dawn Sturgis inquiry, and I'll gladly defer to Tim on this. It just didn't provide the closure. It only raised more questions about what really happened. And as the title of our event, Mike, is what didn't happen, Skripal and Novichok, what did not happen. And I think we showed what did not happen beyond a shadow of a doubt last night at the event.
Yes. Well, look, let's just have a quick look at comments from Craig Murray after the event.
I thought that was very enjoyable. The audience were very engaged. I was very impressed by the depth of knowledge many people in the audience already had. And that so many local people are so deeply skeptical about the story. And I guess if you live here and you see through it, if you're a thinking person, you are going to understand why so many aspects of the official story of the Skripals are impossible. But I was generally cheered up by how deep-rooted skepticism is in Salisbury, and how very many people in Salisbury do understand that they've been sold a lie.
So, Tim, maybe I could welcome you on at this point. And I mean, what were your thoughts about the audience? That was Craig's opinion. I thought that there was quite a great mix there. There were some UK column members and viewers there, but quite a few that weren't.
It was a great audience, and it was particularly good to see. We had a sort of digression about Skripal's cat. So Skripal had a pet cat, which survived in this apparently Novichok contaminated house. And at the time, the vet raised the alarm to the police. He was concerned about the welfare of this cat, which the police eventually put down.
Right, Tim, let me just interrupt you there, because we actually do have the little bit of video here. So let's just show that little interjection.
I mean, apparently the cat was a pedigree called Nash Van Drake, and it was a very loved cat. I think it had been sort of specially imported by Sergei Skripal. And not to forget these two guinea pigs. But yes, I mean, during the inquiry, Commander Murphy, the chief police witness who was being interviewed, they asked him about this cat, what was happening with the police are going in and out of the house, and what was the welfare of the pets like? And he just said, well, the cat got very distressed, and in the end, we had to euthanize it for its own welfare. Meanwhile, the guinea pigs died of thirst. And there was also a story, in fact, the vet, when he heard what had happened, who had been caring for this cat, immediately got in touch with the police and said, I'm concerned about the welfare of the cat. But somehow this message didn't get passed through. But nevertheless, we had police going in and out of that house. Indeed, in the early days, they didn't think the door was the source of this alleged poison. So they were using it quite freely, and yet they allowed the pets to sort of somehow waste away.
I think that veterinarian is in the room with us. Howard, if you tell us what happened then and what happened to the cat.
Yeah, I was actually treating the cat at the time. And for those of you who are interested, I can tell you more about what it was like knowing Mr. Skripal. I phoned the police and told them that I was concerned that the cat needed a repeat of its medication, and I was happy to look after the cat if that's what they wanted. And then also having known him personally for a few years at that stage, I can't honestly say. I'd have to go back and look at the records to see when I first met him. But I saw, because the cat had regular treatment, it was a chronic condition the cat had, and I got to know him as well as I suppose you could. He used to talk a lot to me about him traveling, about his son dying. I met his.
So if you want to see the rest of that little exchange, do go and have a look at the live stream. But Tim, that the point here is that I appreciate we're talking about a cat and some guinea pigs, but what we're seeing here is, in a sense, an example of the brutality of the state, that they didn't actually care about the welfare of the animals. They destroyed one and allowed the others to waste away.
That's right. And in fact, it's my understanding that the bodies of the animals were incinerated at Porton Down. And it was just another example of this sort of systematic destruction of evidence, if you like. I mean, people think about pets as their friends, and so it's an emotional thing about the cat, obviously from the Skripal's point of view. But materially speaking, we saw where the Rowley household used to be. That was bulldozed. All these places, the mill, Sizzy's, these places were completely stripped and decontaminated. So there's this sort of systematic, as you say, sort of brutal cleansing in every possible way of any evidence that could link back. So it was really fascinating to meet someone with that direct connection to the Skripal family at the event yesterday.
Yeah, it was. And Patrick, now Craig Murray did offer a couple of alternative scenarios that perhaps explain the facts a little bit better. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not the first time I've heard that. Craig told us that in the summertime at Beautiful Days Festival, and that's according to his source, which he said has been reliable in the past. So, as you know, Craig's a veteran of the Foreign Office and has relationships in the civil service and people connected to these events. So that's his hypothesis, if you were, based on the sources, that Skripal is being held in Canada. So make of that what you will. I've heard reports about New Zealand and so forth. But that's the question. Where's Sergei Skripal? Where's Yulia Skripal? Why weren't they the star witnesses on Sturgis Inquiry? Because that could have put all questions to rest. But we're guessing that if they were to testify or to speak about what happened to them, that might undermine the official state narrative on this issue and then destroy the geopolitical value of this being such a divisive story between East-West relations, between the West of Britain and Russia and so forth, as it pertains to the support for the Ukraine war presently as well. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and but Patrick, he did also in the Q&A consider the possibility that in fact the Skripals are no longer alive.
And that would be quite sad, but I think we can agree that they must be being held, if they are alive, they're being held under guard, at least with Yulia against her will, and then being fed or cocooned in an environment where they're being told that they're under threat of assassination from the Russian state still, and so they can't come back to society or have normal lives, basically living a witness protection program under guard, because they're very valuable state assets from the Western perspective, because their silence keeps the narrative in place on this story. But if they were to talk, I'm sure there would be some new details that would come to the fore.
Tim, just to finish this segment off, then, just what are you hoping that this event has achieved?
Well, clearly, we hope to raise consciousness about the controversy and the general dissonance in this story and just bring it to the forefront in an accessible way, make people... I mean, I think we were all hoping that we could have convinced some people. As it turned out, most of the audience was already fairly skeptical towards this story. But that's really what we're hoping to do, just to raise the consciousness because of the geopolitical aspects to it. And just on whether or not the Skripals are alive, apparently they both supplied statements to the inquiry. So clearly we're expected to believe that the British state does have a means of getting in touch with them and getting stuff from them, but neither of those statements were signed. So from a legal point of view, if it had been a court case, they wouldn't have been admissible, and we would be taking them as serious statements.
It is fascinating that every time we speak to you, Tim, there's yet another little fact that comes out that so yes, thank you very much for that today, and thank you very much for last night. Everybody that was there enjoyed it immensely. I know that the viewership on the live stream was spectacular. So thanks to everybody that was involved in that, and well, keep sharing it, please, because this is, as Tim says, really important to get as much as many eyes on it as possible. Okay, let's move on then, Patrick, to the U.S. national security strategy, because the publication of the U.S. national security strategy has caused quite a furore over the last week or so. Well, that and Trump's comments about the EU, of course. Just looking at this little thing from the introduction on continental Europe, this is what it says. Continental Europe has been losing a share of global GDP, down from 25% in 1990 to 14% today, partly owing to national and transnational regulations that undermine creativity and industriousness. But this economic decline is eclipsed by the real, more stark prospect of civilizational erasure. The larger issues facing Europe include activities of the European Union and other transnational bodies that undermine political liberty and sovereignty, migration policies that are transforming the continent and creating strife, censorship of free speech, and suppression of political opposition, cratering birth rates, and loss of national identities and self-confidence. And Patrick, I suppose before we get into the bones of this thing, the comments about Europe, I think, could equally apply to the United States. In fact, and particularly with respect to the censorship thing, which we'll be talking about later on in the program. But that criticism of Europe, is Trump just not looking in the mirror at all?
Yeah, exactly. Everything that's happening in Europe is also happening in the United States, although slightly different and with maybe less intensity. But they're both heading in the same direction of travel. And the mega corporations and the state are colluding in order to restrict speech. So there's a lot of contradictions in a lot of the events. I mean, on one hand, they're talking about, oh, the nation state is the primary organizing principle, and we must, promote sovereignty of nations. And then on the other hand, the United States is saying, well, they're not sovereign to trade with who they want to trade with, i.e., China, Russia, or enemies of the United States. So it's totally contradictory, totally hypocritical. And they say Europe's GDP is down in terms of overall percentage from the 90s till now. I mean, you're talking about a span of 35 years. This is the most stupid comment in this report. It takes away the obvious answer to that question is there's a relative drop in GDP, but that corresponds with the rise in growth from Asia. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work. These people are just idiots. I don't know who wrote this report, but it must have been Sebastian Gorka or one of these ne'er-do-wells that's orbiting Donald Trump. It's worse than a freshman first year, political science paper. It's that bad, and it's completely hypocritical on top of that. So all in all, worthless. But what it does is it does point to a real kind of neocon worldview where the U.S. wants to maintain its hegemony at the expense of everybody else. But at the same time, it's saying, "Oh, we recognize a multipolar world." I mean, they can't make up their mind on what they're trying to say. It's just ridiculous.
Yes. On the other hand, Patrick, the Russian response seems to be quite positive.
Well, the Russians are playing the smart game. They'll take any positive that's in there, and they'll definitely promote that. They want to have better relations with the United States and stable relations and bilateral relations with the U.S. So of course they're going to accentuate the positive things in there. But this report is also very punishing of Russia having relations with countries, especially in the Western Hemisphere. So it's the contradictions are incredible.
Right. Well, look, there was one thing I did want to bring on screen, and that was a comment in response to it from Dmitry Peskov, and in response to the whole Ukraine thing as well, because it sort of worries me that the Russian response here is using very similar, if not identical, language to that being used by Starmer. So, for example, Dmitry Peskov here is saying Russia's priority is to see a stable, guaranteed long-term peace achieved through the signing of appropriate documents rather than a ceasefire. And it's the rather than a ceasefire bit of it that I'm finding most concerning, because that's the kind of rhetoric that we've seen out of Starmer in the last few days. Starmer using it as justification for the continuation of the war. Why can't they have both?
Well, you don't want to, if you're Russia or someone who's winning this conflict militarily, a ceasefire provides a strategic pause for NATO and the Ukrainians. And so they'd rather do background negotiations like normal diplomacy to set up a negotiated settlement under terms that are agreeable to the main parties, i.e. the United States and Russia in this case, maybe Europe. And so it's pointless to have this beforehand. So Starmer wants to keep the war going for different reasons than Russia wants to keep the war going. So there might be a parallel in rhetoric, but they're coming from two completely different places on this.
Yes. Okay. Well, thanks for that. Now, over the last couple of weeks, we have been absolutely highlighting the insane rhetoric out of Western leaders, not least Britain and European leaders. But Mark Rutte has to be probably one of the worst. Let's just have a listen to some comments that he was making yesterday.
We are Russia's next target. And we are already in harm's way. When I became NATO Secretary General last year, I warned that what is happening in Ukraine could happen to allied countries too. That we have to shift to a wartime mindset. We need to be ready. Because at the end of this first quarter of the 21st century, conflicts are no longer fought at arm's length. Conflict is at our door. Russia has brought war back to Europe. And we must be prepared for the scale of war our grandparents and great-grandparents endured. Imagine it. A conflict reaching every home, every workplace. Destruction, mass mobilization, millions displaced. Widespread suffering and extreme losses.
Patrick, where do we even start with that?
Just I don't want to use any profanity on the air, but it's hard to find the words to respond to such a stupid, idiotic comment by Mark Rutte. His grandparents or great-grandparents during the Second World War he's talking about, or the First World War, they did not live in the age of thermonuclear weapons. What is he talking about? It's not going to be, the trench warfare in Europe. There's going to be no Maginot Line between France and Germany. It's going to be missiles, and it's going to end very quickly. Not even time for suffering for many people, sadly, if that's the case. It's just ridiculous. I don't know.
It really becomes harder to sort of find the words to describe it, but these people are unhinged.
Yeah. So again, talking up this permanent state of war, justifying conscription, huge expenditures in terms of arms and military expenditures, and so I have not seen any indication that the public in these European countries want to go to war with Russia. But I see indication that the leadership, who are polling an average of 10%, 15% in many cases, they want to go to war with Russia, or they're talking it up. That kind of tells you all you need to know in this case.
Right. Well, Patrick, let's just very briefly come on to the Venezuela situation then.
So this is, again, totally the Trump administration has just gone full neocon here. So they've taken a oil tanker. Supposedly it's under sanctions, and so that justifies them seizing it. And it's just, this is an act of war, and they have their sights set on more tankers. And the incredible part about this is that the United States, Donald Trump is openly talking about taking the oil. So we do have some video clips on this as well, but this is a major escalation. There's no justification for it at all, and yet this is what's happening. So when Trump was pressed on this, this is what he had to say when he was pressed on what are you going to do with the oil once you take it. But before we show that clip, you can see here we have some footage of the United States sending TAC teams in with Apache helicopters doing fast roping down to the deck of this Venezuelan oil tanker, and then at gunpoint, capturing the crew who presumably are unarmed. So it's just a total act of aggression. You see this theme over and over again with the United States. They're very good at attacking people who are unarmed, as are their allies, like the Israelis. But they don't dare engage militarily with anybody that has to strike back, because we all know how that might end. It's probably a bad political ending for Donald Trump. So this seems like a safe way to wage war. We have this clip of Trump being pressed here about what you're going to do with the oil. It's extraordinary if we can listen to that.
It's unfortunate what happened. I mean, I know exactly what happened. It got it started a little bit, but we'll see if we can put it out.
We're interested in the seizure of this tanker. What happens to the oil on this ship?
Well, we keep it, I guess.
Where does it go? What port does it go to?
Well, you have to follow the tanker. You know, you're a good newsman. Just follow the tanker.
Do you know where it was going? Was it going
follow
to
it.
China?
Get a helicopter and follow the tanker.
Is it true it's going to
But we're
Cuba?
I assume we're going to keep the oil.
Extraordinary. So he looks very haggard and tired as well. Donald Trump's just kind of transformed into an old dope in this second term. I mean, you can see he's lagging basically, and it's just a ridiculous answer. I mean, even Bush wouldn't be so brazen as to sort of speak like this. But he has form. Here's Trump in 2023 on the campaign trail talking about Venezuela in his first term. Let's roll this clip.
Venezuela. How about we're buying oil from Venezuela? When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. It would have been right next door.
So, you know, where are the other NATO members or other Britain basically commenting on this just outrageous dispense of international law and international norms? And as Al Jazeera, great piece here on Al Jazeera, the U.S. is already at war with Venezuela. So it's not like they're going to be at war. They are at war. It's already started. And so how is the rest of the so-called international community that's just so concerned about acts of aggression by the Russians and so forth? Where are they on the United States with this? It's unbelievable.
Yes, so we'll keep our eyes on this and keep reporting on it. Patrick, thank you very much for that. Now Patrick has to go now, so enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you next week. So thanks.
The digital ID protest, if you do have that during the ad break, I'll be speaking with alongside Gareth and David Icke and others at BBC Broadcasting House on Saturday, 1 p.m. Central London. Be there.
Yeah, absolutely. See you at 1 p.m. Super. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Okay, if you like what the UK Column does, then please head over to the UK Column website. ukcolumn.org is where you find it. There is a link here that takes you to a page that explains how you can help us. We do need your ongoing financial support, so if you possibly join as a member or make a donation, that would be fantastic. But please do share material you see on the website, or this news program for that matter, and get this stuff spread out as widely as possible to beat the censors. Tonight at 7 p.m., Charles and I are speaking to Jerm, as usual, on censorship, on the issue of censorship, and also on the issue of self-censorship. That's at 7 p.m. tonight. Join us for that. Carl is also looking at Venezuela in the Silk and Steel podcast. He's speaking to Diego Sequeira on this. This is the truth from Caracas. So join Carl at 9 p.m. for that. Okay, let's see where that takes us. takes us to the issue of censorship, and age verification is a thing right across the so-called Western world now. And as Brian mentioned on Friday, Australia is the most extreme version so far, banning anyone under the age of 16 from accessing social media platforms. But just like the UK, they're not banning anyone from accessing the actually dangerous platforms where most grooming takes place. So these are the platforms that were listed by the e-Safety Commissioner in Australia: Facebook, Instagram, Kik, Reddit, Snapchat, Threads, TikTok, Twitch, X, and YouTube. So they are required to take reasonable steps to prevent Australians from under 16 from having accounts on their platforms. But excluded from that is this list, if we can bring that on screen. So this includes Discord, GitHub, Google Classroom, Lego Play, Messenger, Pinterest, Roblox, Steam, and Steam Chat, WhatsApp, and YouTube Kids. Now, of course, as I've been trying to remind everybody as often as possible for the last number of weeks, Roblox in particular is a horrendous venue for children, because it is the location that a vast amount of grooming by adults of children takes place. Now, this situation in Australia is absolutely reflective of the situation in the UK, because, of course, they're using the mantra of child protection to try to justify this action. But they're not protecting children at all, because it does not handle the issue of adults posing as children on platforms that are geared towards children. So that it seems to be the same narrative right across the planet at the moment. Now, let's bring on the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the campaign group. They've published what they describe as a resource hub covering the issue of age verification. And they make the point that age verification is proliferating across the United States and across the world, creating surveillance and censorship regimes that will be used to harm both youth and adults. They say that these restrictive mandates strike at the foundation of a free and open internet. And they say that while they're wrapped in legitimate concern about children's safety, they operate as tools of censorship used to block people, young and old, from viewing or sharing information that governments deem harmful or offensive. They also create surveillance systems that critically undermine online privacy and chill access to vital online communities and resources. And so they're saying that their new resource hub is a one-stop shop for information that people can use to fight back and redirect lawmakers to things that actually will help young people, like comprehensive privacy law. And they make the point that the United States is not immune from this, despite the First Amendment. They're saying that half of US states have enacted some sort of online age verification law. So this is mostly happening at the state level. And they make the point that at the federal level, a House Energy and Commerce subcommittee just a week or so ago was holding a hearing on legislative solutions to protect children and teens online. So, this is a problem right through the world. Now, moving on then, because just the issue that has the response from people to age checks has been the increasing use of virtual private networks. And of course, just a couple of months ago, the House of Lords was running this debate on virtual private networks and whether they should be allowed to, that we should be allowed to continue to use them. So the attack on VPNs was beginning in September or so. Just recently then, an update or an amendment proposed by the Lords to the latest child-related legislation is now calling for a ban on the use of VPN services by children. So this is by Lord Nash, Baroness Cass, and Baroness Benjamin, and they are asking for a new clause to be added entitled "Action to prohibit the provision of VPN services to children in the United Kingdom." So we're going to see limitations on the use of VPNs, beginning with children, and I'm quite certain expanding to adults at a later date. And then finally on this, and I see Basil's with us. I hope Basil will have something to add to this, but I just want to mention this issue here. So this organization, so Retro Uncensored, is talking about the latest censorship by Facebook. Now, they call themselves, they say that they track censorship, they reinstate blocked accounts, they research patterns of suppression and build creative tools. If you just put that back on screen, William, please. Build creative tools that protect cultural, political, and bodily autonomy worldwide. So they are looking at censorship of the trans agenda, censorship of gender-related issues. So just they are saying, for example, that Facebook has censored or closed down pages, 15 plus queer accounts raised in 1 week. In this headline, they're talking about Facebook takedown of another page called @WomenHelpWomen, and another one here, Instagram shadow ban of a channel called @IndigenousWomenRising. Now, the problem that I have here, Basil, if I can welcome you to the program, is that, of course, lots and lots of people have been complaining about exactly this type of behavior over the last 5 or 6 years. But I would suspect that those same people may be less than unhappy to see this type of material being taken down. But it seems to me that if we're going to stand for the principle of freedom of speech, unfortunately, whether we like the particular content that's being taken down or not, we've got to object to that censorship.
Hi, Mike. Yes, great to be with you, and hello to all our viewers and listeners. I'm a free speech absolutist, but a genuine one, not like the so-called Free Speech Society run by Hugo Young, which is extremely selective about which causes it chooses to champion. Other than the conspiracy to murder or commit an offence, shouting fire in a crowded cinema, I believe we should all be able to say what we like. It was really the introduction of so-called hate speech laws that saw the permanent, well, we hope it's not permanent, but the biggest meaningful erosion of free speech in Britain. And since then, of course, together with the whole question of child protection and the conflation of opinions that the government doesn't like with extremism and terrorism, we've seen the margins gradually narrowed. The acceptable opinion corridor has become squeezed, hasn't it, Mike? And this is just another example of it. We see it all the time across social media. Dr. Rame Aladwan, who we've talked about on here before, the British Palestinian doctor, was arrested again last week, and apparently because she used some terms which the British state has deemed are not acceptable. To bring us right up to date on this, just this week, the BBC has issued new guidelines for its employees, and these include avoiding using the word Zionist when criticizing Israel to avoid causing offense to Jewish people. This module of anti-Semitism training, which will no doubt be echoed by the upcoming NHS anti-Semitism training, states that those who claim to be anti-Zionist, not anti-Semitic, should be aware that many Jewish people identify as Zionists, as of course do many Gentiles, including our own Prime Minister and the entire cabinet. But anyway, it goes on. To avoid unintentional offence, they should specify the Israeli government as the target of their criticism. And all BBC staff now have 6 months to comply with this training. I mean, I wonder where that is going to conflict with the right that David Miller won in court to be an anti-Zionist. And you have to use the term Zionist, unfortunately. What if you don't simply want to criticize the Israeli government as it stands, but you delegitimize Israel? You don't think it has any right to exist. I'm not sure where the space for that is in that particular BBC module.
Indeed, thank you very much for that. Okay, let's move on then to the issue of Filton Six. And first of all, Basil, I just want to bring this on screen from Sky News because the headline here is 5 Palestine action prisoners taken to hospital as hunger strike continues. A letter describes the deteriorating health of prisoners as their hunger strike continues. Now, this is one of the most insidious aspects of the whole thing, I suppose. Now, last night, then, Craig Murray was asked by Patrick for his thoughts on the Filton case. So let's just have a quick listen to what he said.
On the trial of the Filton Six, just where things are at right now, your thoughts, how you feel about the proceedings so far, and where do you think this is going?
Well, the prosecution have concluded their case. What came over very plainly was that all of the security guards and most of the police plainly said things that were not true. They made statements about how violence started, who was holding what weapon, who hit whom, which were proved to be untrue by video evidence. We also learned that there's a real problem with custody of the video evidence because it had been in the custody of Elbit. It had actually been given in Metropolitan Police evidence bags to Elbit to look after for a year. So, these were major problems with the process.
That's not standard practice, is it?
No, it's quite extraordinary. It completely destroys the chain of custody. And also there was a great deal of video which the defence were able to show, which had been produced on disclosure, which had not been shown by the prosecution, who of course released to the public in the middle of a trial which has reporting restrictions. Released to the public was extremely edited video, some bits of which were not even chronological, in order to give a false picture of what actually happened. All of which is, of course, the evidence which is now before the jury. We're now in the early stages of the defence, where defendants are setting out their motives for taking part in the action and their version of what happened. And, of course, what's going to be interesting to see is whether the defendant's statements are closer to the actual video evidence.
On the issue of the hunger strikers, this harkens back memories of Irish hunger strikers. And this is happening in 2025. Your thoughts on that part of the story?
I'm horribly worried about this. I've been very, very worried about it for some time. That they are now entering the phase where death becomes a real possibility, and where irreversible harm starts to be done, where the body is starting to eat its own organs at this stage, things like the muscle of the heart. So this is really, really serious. And what worries me is we have an extremely authoritarian government, and the government which seems utterly determined in the middle of a genocide to demonstrate its unwavering commitment to Israel and to Zionism. I think the government will take pride in not giving way, their demands are perfectly reasonable. Their demands are about being given bail rather than kept in jail on remand. Their demands are about being given access, the defence being given access to all the documents showing interactions between Israel and Elbit and the police, to show political interference in their case. These are not unreasonable demands. But I think the government is in real danger. The government will take pride in showing their loyalty to Israel by allowing these people to die. And I very much fear that's what we're going to see in the next week or two. I'm desperately, desperately worried about this.
It's very concerning. Thank you, Craig Murray. Thank you very much.
So, Basil, before we come back onto the case itself, I'm interested to get your thoughts on this. So they've been taken to hospital. Now, the question is there a possibility of the state intervening to force them to take some kind of nutrition?
That's always a possibility, but David Lammy refused to discuss the hunger strikes in Parliament. He was, of all people, he was attacked by the Speaker himself, Lindsay Hoyle, who rebuked him for failing to engage with MPs. One of the hunger strikers is a constituent of Jeremy Corbyn. He's written to David Lammy this week. I don't know that he's had a reply. As Craig Murray said there, it looks as if the government, and indeed the corporate media as well, because even The Guardian, let alone the usual suspects like the BBC are assiduously ignoring this case, and it seems they're quite happy to let them die, and what's more, for the whole cause to be memory hold in real time.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I did do a quick search of the mainstream media for for this story, and there was almost nothing came up.
No, that's right. You'd really have to dig around. It's only on a few, independent media websites that you find out anything about it at all, particularly what their demands are. But yes, as Craig said, some of them have already been hospitalised. Dr. James Smith, who is an emergency NHS doctor in contact with their families, has warned this is a trajectory that ends with death. But of course, we're dealing with a government who are no strangers to death. They've been quite happy to see the evisceration and mass murder of the Palestinian people over the last couple of years, and indeed, as Declassified have uncovered, to actively participate in it. So why on earth would the government be concerned about the death of its own citizens in this way?
Okay, well, we'll come on to the declassified story in a moment, but just before we do that, what are your thoughts on the case itself as it stands at the moment?
Well, as Craig Murray said there, there are questions over change of custody of the evidence, and the fact that Elbit were given the videotapes back to look after indicates once again, as is the case with the banning of Palestine action, of the very close collusion between the UK government, national security state, Elbit Systems in this case, and the State of Israel. They see themselves as one. Profits and what's more, supporting Israel is more important to the British government than upholding international law, or for that matter, the lives of any of its citizens. That is becoming increasingly clear. When Keir Starmer said, "I'm a Zionist without qualification," he obviously meant it, and this is what it means in real time.
Yes, indeed. So let's bring this declassified article up here first of all, because this is headline revealed how British engines ended up in Israeli drones, and the subhead says documents obtained by declassified suggest the government has allowed UK companies to send drone engines to Israel without export licenses. And then the next thing I want to highlight here is this article from the Dissident Substack, and it's entitled "Revealed Israel Used Palantir Technologies in Pager Terrorist Attack in Lebanon." Now, he's mainly citing this book here, The Philosopher in the Valley, by Michael Steinberger. And Steinberger's absolutely suggesting that Palantir provided much of the technology that was used to target those pagers and so on. But Declassified has also produced a documentary, on the issue of the overflights by British, and actually subcontracted then. Let's just look at a few seconds from the beginning of what's on YouTube at the moment, and then we can talk about it.
What does a British base in Cyprus have to do with Israel's genocide in Gaza?
Although we're really proud of what you're doing, we can't necessarily tell the world what you're doing here.
Declassified travelled to this Mediterranean island.
How do you think he knew our names?
To investigate the hundreds of spy flights that Keir Starmer has sent over Gaza.
That's what they're doing. They're off on a death run.
UK is now paying American mercenaries to do their dirty work over Gaza.
That coincided with Israeli airstrikes and the murders of British aid workers.
You're suddenly looking on the television, there's your son in a body bag, and that is one memory that will stay in my mind forever.
So that's just a few seconds from the beginning of this report that they've done, Basil. But it cannot be ignored that the British government, the British military, companies, global companies, okay, but companies like Palantir that receive huge amounts of taxpayer money for a whole host of different purposes, all directly involved in the deaths of Palestinians.
Oh no, absolutely, Mike. It's really off the charts, this whole business. Extraordinary confession there by Keir Starmer, which we heard, which passed off almost unnoticed at the time, that we can't tell the world what you're doing here, he said to the troops and Air Force personnel at Akrotiri Bay, obviously with something to hide. Well, what could it be that they've got to hide there? Why is Britain involved in that theatre at all? Now, they've confessed to these spy flights. That's public knowledge now. But of course, the claim is that the information passed to the Israelis has been used, or was used rather, solely for the purpose of locating the hostages. But there are two problems with that. One is, of course, that the Israelis are habitual and compulsive liars. And secondly, that the captives been largely underground. We're talking about only a couple of dozen people, and the idea that these regular flights would be needed at night as well in order to attempt to locate hostages is quite obvious nonsense. And then, of course, there's the fact that these spy flights coincided with cold-blooded massacres. That's the key point. The timings are exactly the same, including a spy flight was in the air when 3 British aid workers, as was mentioned there, John Chapman, Jim Henderson, and James Kirby, were murdered. Now, on the back of that, of course, the UK government immediately demanded a full and urgent investigation from Israel. And a year and a half later, Mike, do you think there's been one?
I do not.
Of course not. And what's more, of course, is that the British government totally failed to press the Israelis for any such investigation because, well, they would also implicate themselves. But the simple fact is that defense ministers like Luke Pollard, only willing to confirm that flights are ongoing and the government would not discuss the intelligence for reasons of operational security. Other times they've invoked national security, though what it's got to do with the UK's national security, I'm not sure. The simple fact is the government has not escalated the matter diplomatically. It has not commissioned its own inquiry into the deaths of the aid workers. It hasn't shared the RAF surveillance footage. It hasn't provided the families of those murdered with any new information. We all know Israel's habitual disregard for external accountability. And once again, as we highlighted earlier, Mike, the government regards its alliance with Israel, which it never hesitates to describe as an ally, to be far more important than either investigating the deaths of the 3 British aid workers, or, of course, being open with the general public about exactly what these flights are all about. But that documentary is subheaded, Will this put Keir Starmer in jail? And it certainly ought to, because very direct line can be drawn between these flights and war crimes in international law. So, we're rapidly entering the age of barbarism, unfortunately, Mike, where global leaders like Donald Trump, blowing up Venezuelan fishermen, like the Israelis, and now Britain as well, just flagrantly demonstrating they have no regard whatsoever for humanitarian norms or for international law.
But the problem here is that Tony Blair set the precedent, isn't it? That is basically the problem.
Yes.
So these people think that they can get away with anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're reaping the bitter harvest of 2003, 2004, and the failure to prosecute people responsible for that illegal war. In fact, like Tony Blair, they tend to be rewarded with high office and riches and all sorts of other things. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, no one who cheerled for the Iraq war has any place in public life. But again, I'd have thought that with the demonstration of genocide by the Israelis so flagrantly, openly, and the terrorist things like, as you mentioned there, Palantir providing the software for pages that blew up in children's faces, let's not forget. You would think that there might be some degree of contrition on the part of the British government and Israel advocates, but quite the opposite. In fact, they're sort of doubling down on their lawlessness and seeking to suppress and prosecute people, seeking to uphold international law or support Palestinian human rights. I mean, Francesca Albanese was interviewed by Tucker Carlson this week. She's being treated like a criminal by the United States. She said to him, "My only weapon is a pen." And yet she's sanctioned by the United States for seeking to uphold international law. I mean, it's the worst ever crisis of international law that I can remember, Mike.
And just to bring this back then to the Filton Six, of course, they are facing prosecution for damaging property. One person facing, in fact, potentially a lifetime term for the physical assault that is alleged. So we've got that on one hand, people that are protesting mass murder on one hand, and we've got the mass murderers themselves on the other hand that continue to walk around scot-free.
Yes, exactly. People, I'm pleased to say, have been making this point, online at various chat shows, that why is it that you can be a mass murderer? We had Isaac Herzog visiting Britain recently. He was one of the people that put the enormous pressure on Eurovision not to kick Israel out, as a result of which Spain, the Netherlands, this week, Iceland have all withdrawn. The Icelandic chap who won it a couple of years ago has returned the trophy. A large number of Portuguese contestants have said they're not going to participate. And the Portuguese broadcasters have said, well, we don't care. We'll go ahead anyway. We'll get somebody who wasn't even involved in the competition to represent Portugal. So, Israel's lawlessness is tearing up not just international law, but all forms of European competition. There's also, interestingly, I saw this week, legal moves against the president of FIFA for failing to hold Israel to account in the international football arena. And again, complicity in genocide. We're not talking about minor crimes here. If the UK government can be proved, will it ever come to court? Who knows? Because they refuse to release the footage. That the UK government have shared intelligence with a foreign entity actively engaged in war crimes. There has to be accountability for that. Otherwise, where does this end? And as you say, the contrast with the prosecution of people who haven't killed anyone at all. It's arguable whether one or two individuals were injured in a relatively minor way in the Filton case. That's sub judice. But their ire has been directed against property and seeking to interrupt the supply of weapons that are then used in war crimes. Elbit are heavily involved in the production of these drones. Just this week, a girl aged 6 was shot in the head twice in Gaza. There's no ceasefire. The conditions there are absolutely hellish, worse than ever. There's no morality anymore. I mean, just as was the case, Patrick said, with Mark Rutte, the insanity. It's not only insane, the world situation we're in, it's also deeply, deeply sinister, Mike. When you've got people responsible for mass murder being greeted as visiting dignitaries, and people trying to stop the slaughter of innocent children prosecuted. We're in a very strange place.
Absolutely, Basil. And on that sinister note, we're going to have to leave it for today. So I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me. You're staying for extra, so we'll talk more about this in a moment, I'm quite sure. Thanks to everybody that's watched, and thanks again to everybody that came to watch the Skripal event last night in Salisbury, and to the rather large number of people that watched it live. That was fantastic. So thanks to everybody that did. Please do share that. Don't forget Germ and Carl's tonight, 7 and 9 p.m. respectively. We'll be back on Monday as usual, 1 p.m. Hope everyone has a great weekend. We'll see you then. See you then.